Welcome in, everybody, to Inside The Burrow. We are back to back. We are following the FAU Owls win over UAB on homecoming weekend on every type of event you could imagine was booked for that weekend. Hall of Fame weekend, 25th anniversary weekend, as we mentioned last time. But the Owls got it done. Kevin Fielder, Robbie, Lastella here with you to recap everything from the Owls win over UAB and look ahead to this week's matchup against USF. Kevin, how's it going?
Again, I just love coming here after wins. This is so much more enjoyable. I hope we never have to do this after a loss again. That was boring. I don't like doing that.
You know, we went through it last year. I think we skipped some weeks. I think last year it just got so bad that, we were like, you can read the recap on FAUOwlsNest.com. You don't need to see us talk about it.
We definitely did skip weeks last year. Let's be completely clear. We did.
We definitely did. Yeah. But you know what? We're back, and then I don't think we're skipping any weeks this year, God willing. But yes, the Owls, they're on a 2-game win streak, and they ended the disaster. It's over. We talked about it last week. UAB with that loss has now gone, or by the amount of days by the next matchup, they will have gone more amount of time with a road victory since the program was shut down. So, Trent Dilfer, great analyst. I liked him as an analyst. I thought he gave good commentary. I thought he was funny. Maybe not the most brilliant mind, but he definitely, gave you that football perspective as an analyst and some humor as it as well. So I think he'll end up back on TV, and I think that role will probably suit him better. Maybe another high school coach. He had some good success as a high school coach, but happy for the UAB fans that went through some hard times there. We saw the Owls go through that with Tom Herman. And to a lesser extent, Willie Taggart. But the Tom Herman and Trent Dilfer experiences were both probably, you can say, unmitigated disasters. So now both of their tenures are done, and both programs can move forward. The Owls especially, because outside of ending Trent Dilfer's coaching tenure, they look good on the field. They jumped out to a 28-0 lead, I believe. It was 28-21. UAB crawled back in, scored 2 touchdowns, make it 28-14. But then the Owls, they grabbed momentum before the half, which was a struggle there in the beginning of the season, hasn't been a struggle over the past 2 weeks. I think that's a big part in their success lately. And then obviously all foot on the gas there in the second half. They got the job done. 33 points. Some people may read into that and be like, oh, our defense still sucks. UAB put up 30 on Tennessee, I believe, as well. So, they got a high-powered offense. The job was to outscore them, and that's what was done. It wasn't ugly. It was a good game, and so you got to move forward and build on that, because you got a tough opponent this week in USF. What I like to see especially is Caden Shields-Dutton breakout game, 3 touchdowns for him. Last Owl to have 3 touchdowns was Zuberi Mobley last year against FIU. Always good when you get a running back 3 touchdowns, more likely to win that game than not. So that's big, because as we've talked about on this podcast before, Kevin, when the running back room a little scary, so you're going to need Cade to step up, and he did. So overall, though, what did you like other than the disaster ending from the Owls win?
Well, before we begin, we mentioned the Fire Trent Dilfer website last time. They have updated the website. It now says mission complete,
really?
End of an error. So they are all rejoicing on that. And you know what? I'm happy for them. On FAU's perspective, I thought that was a great game. Again, am I going to grade it an A-plus game? Probably not. I think when you allow 33 points, you give up a 28-0 lead and kind of keep it close at the end. I can't sit here and in good conscience say you played an A-plus game because you kind of went to halftime, at least I did, kind of sweating a little bit. You give up 2 touchdowns to end the half, and I'm sitting here going, ooh, this might get scary. You kind of let UAB back in this game. That's one thing you couldn't do. But to FAU's credit, they played incredibly well in the second half. They did exactly what they needed to in the second half. And I think that's the most important thing out of this is, while UAB is a bad football team, and they are going to continue to be a bad football team this year. And I'm not sure that they'll win a game in the American Athletic Conference this year. You needed a game where you just felt comfortable about how you played for the entirety of the game. And I come here, we're recording this on Tuesday night. I feel comfortable with the way FAU played. And that's good because now you get into this stretch of the season, which is only going to be challenging. You have USF coming up. You have Navy, who I'm going to say this every time, I still think are the favorites to win the conference. You have tough games coming up. There's not an easy game left on the schedule. And so you got past these two games that could have been considered wins, could have been considered, easier games. You got out of them with wins. Couple guys who stood out. Asad Wasim continues to play well as an outside receiver in this offense. Had 105 yards, a touchdown. Jayshawn Platt made some explosive plays, which I think has really become his role. On defense, DJ DeGette had, I think, 2 sacks? 2.5 sacks? Was 2.5 over the place on defense. They created pressure. They made UAB one-dimensional. The stats really probably won't show it, but UAB threw the ball 41 times. They ran the ball 28 times for about 2.5 yards per carry. They didn't produce a lot on offense. It was really FAU controlling this game from start to finish. And so the score might look like 20 points. This was more than a 20-point game, in my opinion. I think FAU played a game that is more indicative of what they can be. Now, can they do this against a team like USF? Who knows? But I think you got a great Caden Veldkamp game. You finally got the running game involved. You got a complete offensive performance to some degree, at least. Defensively, I think you need to clean up some of the explosive plays. You need to clean up some of those things. But that is a game that I am encouraged about point blank. We'll see if this carries over, but you needed a game like this. You needed a game that you could just dominate at home and feel comfortable about because you haven't had a lot of those over the last few years.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned Caden, good game. That's really back-to-back really good games for Caden Veldkamp. His yards per attempt, he's set a season high now in back-to-back games. 8.8 against Rice this week, 10.3. And going back before that, it never had been above 8. So he's definitely starting to feel a little more comfortable. And the interceptions have been cut down. We haven't seen multiple interceptions since FIU. Just the one here, back-to-back week. Obviously, you're having those mistakes happen, but they're happening at less rate. 72.4% completion this week, 69.7% last week. So I feel like he's really starting to hit his stride. And we'll see kind of how he continues to build on it. You mentioned the connections with the receivers. East MS are only 1 touchdown on the year. I'm interested to kind of see if they kind of that amps up at all, or if, it just happens with the game plan. We've seen Assad step up in that role. And Jayshawn Platt, shout out him. There's a good quote on the Owl's Nest. I'm not gonna play it, but it talks about his journey and how he's kind of developed into this go-to wide receiver now. And that's huge because 2 guys who you potentially thought could have been go-to guys in this offense at the beginning of the year in Quincy Brown and J.R. Wilson have kind of been no-shows so far, both, dealing with the injuries. It looks like, we don't know exactly what those injuries are, but they're both on they were on the list last week. We'll see if that is the case moving forward. But on the defensive side of the ball as well, the pressure is huge. Last year, we talk about this all the time. Last year, pressure was non-existent for the FAU defense. And now, it was that way sort of in the first couple of weeks, but this week you had 22 total pressures on Jalen Kitna, 3 for Wilkie Denard, 3 for CJ Doggett, 3 for Bryce Langston, 2 apiece each for Deshaun Batiste, Earl Miller, and Damon Allen. So and I've noticed this, they're getting pressure not just from the guys up front, but they're getting linebacker pressures, they're getting DB pressures. Brett Dewhurst got some slack there at the beginning of the season because the defense was struggling, but you have to give him credit where credit's due. He's made adjustments. He's found ways to rush the passer. He put together a pretty good game plan, in my opinion, to stop the option and limit Rice, and he did that. Obviously, those are just 2 weeks, and he's doing his job in that regard. But it's encouraging to see those adjustments be made, because like we were saying, USF this week is gonna, it's gonna be a different type of offense. It's gonna be similar to what FAU runs in the up tempo sense, but even more overkill. They're gonna be running, and with the way FAU, they do substitute a decent amount on that defensive line. So we're gonna have to see how these guys hold up. They practice against an offense like that. So that's really what I'm kind of looking for this week is how they're going to, on the defensive side of the ball, how they will adjust to the tempo of that. But something else I want to point out before we dive too deep into USF, offensive line, they've had to make some shuffles. I mean, and that type of stuff goes under the radar a little bit. Whether it was Okinyo King stepping in at left guard and Scarlett Jean moving to left tackle, or Alex Akovich being out, Okinyo King having to move in to right guard. Okinyo King has really kind of been, you never know how things are going to operate when you have to put in a backup lineman. And King's a guy who's been around here for a couple years now developing, and he's been a plug-and-play offensive lineman that is never a guarantee at the G5 level. So that, to me, last week was huge, because UAB does have some pass rush ability, and the offensive line didn't skip a beat with King in there at all.
Robbie, one more thing that I think stood out was FAU was finally able to generate explosive returns in the kick return and punt return game. I think they had a 50-yard kick return. They had about a 32 or so yard punt return from Easton Messer. The easiest way to fix any issues you have on either side of the ball is to get some yards on special teams. That's where you can steal some yards. That's where you can steal good field position. And when you have 2 really good returns, and I think a few other ones that were promising, this quickly becomes an entirely different scenario for FAU. This is now a situation where, and especially I think in a game against USF and against Navy and against some of these tougher opponents in conference, even East Carolina, who looks like a dang good football team, you're going to need that special team side of things. You're going to have to win in the margins. And to me, winning in the margins is winning on special teams. It's being able to get good returns, it's being able to limit good returns. It's being able to force a blocked punt or force a turnover or force some kind of explosive play there that changes the course of the game. And maybe in this game against UAB, it didn't really do it because they were up so big. They were up 28-0 at one point. They finished the game up 53-33 or whatever the final score was exactly. But those signs are encouraging. Be able to generate explosive returns, be able to generate explosive plays on that side of the ball, because you're going to need something from the special teams unit down the stretch here. You can't just be playing offense versus defense the entire time, because eventually you're going to force a punt, you're going to need a return, you're going to need something that your team can build off of. And I think the fact that Jay-Sean Platt, Easton Messer both had explosive returns in this game is incredibly encouraging for the rest of the year, because that's the thing that I think has just been a question mark that you don't know until you see it happen. And to see it happen in the same game like that, incredibly encouraging. That's something that I think you could take away from this game, is like, maybe we didn't have that all year, but now we're sort of starting to find some of those explosive plays that can change the course of a game.
100%. I mean, the special teams was kind of catching some flack there early in the season. There were some mistakes in the holding department that got ironed up, but there was a lack of explosive plays. And now, Jay-Sean Platt, let's talk about it. I mean, against UAB, he had 4 returns for 119 yards, along with 50. It's good for an average of 29.8. And Easton Messer, 2 punt returns for 53 yards, average of 26.5, had a long of 31. So both those guys getting it done. And, we knew Messer was going to be that guy, but this was the first year where Jay-Sean Platt was going to be put into a go-to role. And I love to see it. I mean, he coming into the year, he never had a season where he was a feature piece of the offense. And I think that, we didn't really know what we were going to get, but 23 receptions for 327 yards, 2 touchdowns in the receiving department. And then as a returner, 16 returns for 367 yards. He's already surpassed as many returns as he had as a full-time returner pretty much in 2022. And I think the sky is only up for Jay Sean the rest of this year. I think the surface is just kind of being scratched with him. And there's other guys in that room too. Dom Henry had the long touchdown. Brandon Hoke, he's still, I still think he might redshirt. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. We'll see. But he's getting close to that 4-game total. I don't know if he will. But if he doesn't, they gotta use his talent, because it's undeniable that he can contribute. We've seen him make some spectacular plays so far, and then another guy, Jabari Smith, as well, had 1 reception for 37 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's his first real. Was that his first catch of the season? Yeah, that was his first touchdown catch. And that was his longest catch of the season as well. So that's another guy who's kind of been buried on the depth chart a little bit, but we saw him be a big contributor last year. And so as FAU, continues into the grind here of conference play, I'm interested to see how they kind of get some of these weapons involved who haven't kind of been seen yet, because that's how you kind of get a little angle on somebody, is you pull J.R. Wilson, who's been out most of the season, out of a hat for a play design. You get Jabari Smith involved, and he gets a 37-yard touchdown. So they have some guys who haven't been tapped into yet, that could really add another dimension to this offense. So intriguing stuff here. Moving ahead to USF, the Bulls look a lot different than the team we saw last year. They I'm sure all the FAU fans don't need me to explain USF. I think they might pull their hair out if I do. But obviously everyone knows they've had a strong start to the season. Last week they bullied North Texas 63-36. North Texas was in that game, and then all of a sudden they were not. And I think that's the very good description of what USF's offense is capable of. In the same way, that's what FAU's offense is capable of. It's 2 really good offenses that are going to be going at each other here in this game. Kevin, what have you liked so far from USF this season? What has kind of allowed them to be successful this year? In past years, they were kind of, average.
The defense has come around and played at a really good level. And this is a defense that FAU fans will be familiar with, because you go down the list of players and coaches and everything, and there are a lot of former FAU coaches, a lot of former FAU players. Todd Orlando's coaching the defense. Jacob Merrifield is a steady force on the defensive line. A lot of their assistant coaches are former FAU guys. This is a group that coached at FAU under Willie Taggart, moved to USF when Taggart was fired, and now they're putting together this defense that's capable of big plays. And we saw that, I think, really in the second half against North Texas. If no one watched that game, there was a stretch between about the 13-minute mark and the 11.5-minute mark where USF scored 21 straight points. And a lot of that was off turnovers. A lot of that was off getting this North Texas offense with one of the better quarterbacks in Group of 5 football, Drew Mestamaker, off the field and allowing their offense to make plays. That's the difference from years past. They still have this explosive offense. Over the last 3 games of this season, they're running the most plays in college football in that stretch. They're going to run a lot of plays. They're going to get a lot of offensive touches. And the big reason for that is because their defense can make plays that puts an offense behind its pace. Offensively, there's only one guy who really needs to be mentioned, because I think he's the most important piece of this offense, and that's quarterback Byron Brown, who's healthy this year, was not healthy for a lot of last year. This year he's playing well. He's still a little bit prone to what I call the boneheaded plays, the turnovers, the bad passes, the turnover-worthy throws, the plays that you have to take advantage of to beat this USF team. Because truth is, if you try and go punch for punch against USF, you're going to lose. FAU has an explosive offense. USF has an even more explosive offense. And it's been prevalent all year outside of one game against the University of Miami, who truthfully is looking like arguably the best team in college football. So outside of like one game this year, USF has looked like a true playoff contender. And I think a big reason for that is both their defense and the way that Byron Brown has played. If you give Byron Brown opportunities to make you pay on the ground, through the air, he will. Just like being point blank, I know this is an FAU podcast, but this is also a different USF team. This is a USF team that will bully you if you let them bully you. And so the biggest key for FAU is, again, winning in the margins. Can you create a turnover? Can you create a big special teams play? Can you keep your offense on the field long enough to where they can generate explosive plays? Because you can't go second and long, third and long against this team and expect to win. You have to stay on schedule, and you have to win in those margins that we've talked about this episode, because if you don't do those things, USF is going to take advantage. There's too much talent on that roster for them to not take advantage. And that's the biggest thing about this game is I'm not sure it's David versus Goliath, like people may have put this out to be, and that, USF I think is like a 21.5 point favorite at this point. I think that there's a chance they can maybe win this game by that much, but the only way they win this game by that much is because FAU gives them opportunities to. You can't sort of dangle your food in front of them and expect them to not attack it, right? Like, they're going to attack it. They're going to make plays. It's going to be up to FAU to try and win in those margins, because if they don't win in those margins, you're going to have a long, long, long day on Saturday. And it won't just be physically, because they will probably run 95 plays. It will also be figuratively, because you will be looking at that scoreboard wondering how it went from 21-14 to 28 to like 35-14. And you're wondering how they were able to generate so many explosive plays.
That offense moves quick, and I think what has helped them do that, especially Byron Brown's got good protection. He's a mobile quarterback, but he's not running around like a chicken with his head cut off. He's smart with his movements in the pocket. He knows when to tuck it and run, but the line has given him some good time in the pocket. Outside of playing Ruben Bain and the line of one of the best I've seen here in college football in Miami, they've been really, really good. I'm not going to dive too deep into the line statistics, but just to give you a quick overview, I mean, they haven't had a pass blocking grade below 75 or below 70s. They hit 73 last week, but below 70 outside of Miami game. So they've definitely protected Byron Brown well, and so that kind of takes away a way you can frustrate him. His strength is running. So you're not necessarily trying to flush him out of the pocket. But if you can't kind of frustrate him back there with pressure, you're going to have to try to find ways to make that offense run one-dimensional and shut down their running backs. Because if their offensive line is able to limit the pass rush for FAU, got to find a way to disrupt that USF offense. Can't let them just have all day back there in the pocket. That may be the case, but when they look to run it, you got to put them in longer down situations and stuff those runs, and kind of see what you can do. So in this game, to me, on the offensive side of the ball for FAU, I want to see them kind of dictate the game. Obviously USF's offense is going to be flashy. They're going to have big plays, but if FAU can kind of make themselves known as the aggressor, come out with that first punch, let them be the dominant offense in this game, I think that will help. And I think something else I'm going to keep note of in this game is what I noticed in that UNC game. Yes, USF was able to dominate, and they ultimately went on to win without issue. But I noticed there in that third and fourth quarter, they weren't really running the clock like I would in a game like that. To me, it kind of seemed like they were still trying to run that up-tempo offense, and that may be the case. But if USF does that against FAU and FAU's defense is able to kind of nut up and get some stops, assuming this is a situation where FAU may be down if that happens. If USF isn't able to run the ball and chew clock a little bit, that'll allow FAU's offense to get the ball back, and that's when they respond. So if USF does get up in this game, I'm interested to kind of see how they manage the clock, because FAU's offense can respond quickly and in bunch plays just like USF's can. So although this game could get to blowout territory, it's possible. Who knows? USF's really talented. We'll see. I'm interested to see if they can maintain that without changing up their offense a little bit, because FAU's defense does allow big plays from time to time, but we've also seen them be able to bounce back. And if that happens and the offense bounces back, all of a sudden it's a close game again. So I'm kind of interested to see how that time of possession works, Kevin. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that they're just so comfortable with how their offense is playing this year. Over the last 3 games, they've scored 63 points twice and 54 against Charlotte. I think they're just so comfortable with how explosive their offense is that they're generally not concerned about giving opposing offenses a ton of chances, right? Because it still is kind of like it's the complete opposite in the sense of like when you play Navy, they're just going to suffocate you. And if you go down 14 points, you can't come back because you may only have 3 possessions the rest of the game. The thing about USF is that you may have 10 possessions for the rest of the game if you go down 14, but you also have to get a stop on them and score again. It's not like this thing where it's like, man, you're going to keep getting chances, but if you go down 14, you have to stop one of the more explosive offenses in the country. And by almost every advanced metric, they rank within the top 30, which is impressive not only for a group of 5 team, it's impressive for any team in the dang country. So I think that the biggest thing about this is, yeah, if you go down 14 against USF, it's not necessarily game over, thanks for coming. But it does become a lot more challenging to try and win because you also have to find a way to stop this offense. And it kind of happened with North Texas because when they went down after allowing 21 straight points, they went down, I believe it was 21 points, come back, they scored to cut the lead to 14, but it didn't matter because even when you were sitting there going, oh, this game might be close, they're still, midway through the third quarter, I think it was like 8 minutes left when they scored, you were still sitting there going, well, USF's too good. They do too well in between the margins to make these things happen. And so I'm so hesitant to just sit here and be like, well, USF needs to try and shoot the clock because they don't. They're capable of scoring in one play. They're capable of scoring in 2-3 plays and keeping your offense on the field. So really the biggest thing is you can't go down 14 against them. You have to keep this within a 1-score game because you want to be able to continue to be within striking distance of them so that later in the game, if you're running a ton of plays and that defense is tired, that's when you could take advantage because that's what USF has done so well is they run so many plays. They take advantage of that many plays. And by the time the fourth quarter comes around and you're trying to mount your comeback, you're so exhausted on defense because you've ran probably 86 plays to that point, and they're going to finish the game with 90 plus. And so I think very similarly, right, like the way that FAU takes advantage is late in games, defenses are just tired. FAU can't be in a position where they have to try and come back and score 14 points. They have to keep this game within 1 score so that if they get to late in the game and it's a 7-point game with, 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, the defense has enough time to just lock in and get 1 stop. And then your offense gets a chance to attack a defense that's been prone to big plays this year. I will say this defense has done well to create havoc plays, but on the flip side of things, when you run so many plays on defense, they're like, I think 121st in plays run this year on defense, right? When you run so many plays defensively, you also leave yourself open to big time plays, to 40-yard passes, to plays that can change the course of a game. And it does kind of feel like, for me, USF might be a ticking time bomb in that sense, where they're just kind of like one game the defense lets up, but also it's been 6 games that hasn't happened yet. So maybe that's just not going to happen, but FAU needs to be in a spot where in the fourth quarter of this game, it's a 1-score game so that you can try and take advantage of their defense being tired as much as they're trying to take advantage of your defense being tired.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning. I'm interested to see how our guys do in that situation because they practiced against it. They practiced against this type of offense, but you never know how it'll work out until you play against the offense like that in a live game. So we'll see how they're able to adjust in that sense. Going from an offense like UAB that, they were up tempo, but not that much. And then before that, you were playing the option. So this is going to be a different type of offense. And I mean, also, injuries last week, there were a couple on the defensive line. Bryce Langston did play. Nobody was out. And that was a key contributor. But everyone's got to be healthy for this game because gonna need fresh bodies in there when you can sub. Obviously, you're not gonna be able to sub a lot, but when you can, you got to get those guys in there, get them some breaths. That made me wonder. Maybe we saw a lot of rotations in the second half on the defensive line, whether it was Earl Miller Jr., Tyku Hill Lumen. Like there's guys in the backup on the defensive line that were playing before the game was really over, and I wonder if they kind of did that to give these guys, some more valuable reps ahead of a game where you're going to need reinforcements on the defensive line. So this game is all hands on deck, no turnovers on the offense. Can't give USF extra chances offensively. They're going to cash in a lot. They're going to score a lot of points. Can't make that easier for them. Got to find a way to create havoc on the defensive side of the ball. Whether you're able to rush the pass or whether you stuff their run game to the point that they have to pass every down. Whatever you can do to make things difficult for that USF offense, which has been humming, you got to find a way to do it. And you just can't. If you find yourselves down, you can't. They got to just respond. UNT, they just died there in the second half. And, to their credit, they were putting drives together, but that can't happen if you're FAU. You can't just die, and you got to keep pushing. You got to find ways to get points and keep responding to USF. So this game, to me, it doesn't scream blowout. FAU has no chance. Obviously, to me, the early season struggles that FAU faced are getting to a point where they're in the rear view mirror, but there's still always a chance that those mistakes, the little things that you were struggling with that you have started to do right, become problems again. So, this is a week where you're really going to have to make sure everything's buttoned up, and if they can come out into this game, execute on offense, create havoc on defense, I think there's a chance that, I'm not going to say they're going to go in and knock off a ranked team on their home field, but there's definitely a chance that they can give them a ball game. 21.5 is a lot of points to me. If you're a gambler and you take that, you better hope the FAU reverts to the first couple of weeks, because that's just a lot of points. If it happens, it happens. I can see it because, the defense hasn't been perfect. But I think this is a game where, FAU kind of shows, they're competing and this is they're here. I don't know if they'll have enough to knock them off. I don't know. I don't have those answers, but I think they can give them a game. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, they could certainly give them a game. This is like a game that, to some degree, North Texas had that game won, and then so many bad things happened that they were just unable to recover. That feels like maybe just a once in a blue moon kind of thing, right? A couple turnovers. They come out in the second half. They look like the greatest team of all time for 10 minutes. It's really tough to come back from that. But there's also been times this year where teams have sort of kept it close for a little bit against USF. And I think the way that FAU is playing now, with their offense firing on all cylinders, their defense finally coming around, making plays, this feels like a game where it could be close in the fourth quarter, and all it takes is one play to win this game. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think that there's kind of for me, there's really two trains of thought here. It's either USF comes out and they're just a far more talented team. They're motivated because this is a home game for them. They're going to come out. They're going to play this terrific game. And unfortunately, they're just going to be the more talented team. Or that you keep it close because you're riding this momentum wave of winning 2 straight games, of keeping it close against Memphis. You're finally turning a corner. I don't think a lot of people are talking about that nationally, right? Is that USF is this incredibly talented team. Don't get me wrong. Any USF fan that's watching this looking for a clippable moment, you're not getting it from me. This is a USF team that is arguably the best team in the American Athletic Conference and in Group of 5 football. But I still also think that this is a game where, because FAU is playing their best football down the stretch, we could look in the second half and it could be a 7-point game. It would not shock me. It would not shock me if it's 38-31 at one point. You're like, ooh, keeping it close, right? This is exactly where you want to be. I think that's certainly possible. I just don't know if it happens, but I do think there is certainly within the realm of possibility that FAU does enough to keep the game close, to be in a situation where late in the game, you've got just enough momentum to try and make that final push to win the game, because I think that's the goal. The goal is to keep this game close and try and give your team one final push to win. I don't expect you to come out here, blow USF out. I don't expect you to win the game even, but I do want to see you put something together so that as we look towards that final stretch of the year, I'm not sitting here going, wow, every time they've played a good team, they haven't been able to put it together and keep a game close. Just keep it close, keep it competitive. If you get to the fourth quarter and you find a way to win the game, amazing. if you keep it close in the fourth quarter and you know what, USF is just too dang talented, that happens. It's football. This is a good USF team. Just keep it close and let's see what happens off of that.
Yep, 100%. We'll see what happens. For me, as I mentioned, pass rush, it's been good for FAU lately. I don't know if they'll be able to execute against USF's line. We'll see. It's quite possible. CJ Doggett has become a menace in the front, and the edge rushers as well have been heating up. But to me, what seems like a key is, although USF is not a run-heavy team, it's a big part of their offense, and all of their running backs are averaging over 5 yards a carry, which allows their passing side of the offense to get comfortable throws, and then it opens up the offense for big shots when you can get 2nd and 1s. If FAU can kind of cut that in half, not 2.5, but maybe get them down to 3 yards a carry, 3.5, make it difficult for them to run the ball. To me, that's a big key in this game, at least to slowing USF's offense down as a whole. There's going to be a lot that goes into it. We'll see what happens. Kevin, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Not really. I think we've covered it all today.
We kind of did. We went in depth for you. But, folks, make the trip to Tampa. Last week, I bullied you to go to the game, and you guys listened. The attendance was awesome. I liked it. Shout out all the families that went. Go to the game this weekend, too. If you're not, you might be a loser. I don't know. I don't make those rules. Look up, and they're on the terms and conditions, FAUathletics.com. If you don't go to the game, you're a loser. But, yeah, ESPNU, 7:30 p.m. in Tampa. It's an NFL stadium. It's all right. It's a good venue. It is what it is. But the Owls are playing, so you should be there. And they might win. You never know.
Any good Saturday.
Yeah, I don't think anyone thought, like I said a couple years, I think I said this in the last episode, I don't think anyone thought that Daniel Richardson was going in there and lighting up the USF team 2 years ago. This is a different USF team. The stakes are a little different. And USF's a lot more talented. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. But go to the game, be loud, make the trip. I hope the students have some type of bus situation going on. I don't know if they do or they don't, but they should because they didn't go to FIU. But if not, go to the game regardless. I may be there. If not, I'm a hypocrite. I don't know. I'm still trying to work that out. But we'll see. Nevertheless, thank you, folks, for tuning in to Inside the Burrow. For Kevin Fielder, I'm Robbie Lastella. We'll see you next week. And maybe in Tampa.